Cosmic horror, a term commonly interchanged with and considered a synonym to Lovecraftian horror, is a horror genre developed and made famous by H.P. Lovecraft. This genre of horror is rooted in the fear of the unknown, the awe of the incomprehensible, and the knowledge that humanity's existence is considered insignificant to beings and agendas far beyond our comprehension. As stated, this genre of horror was created and popularized by Howard Phillips Lovecraft, an American writer of horror fiction, and is best known for his creation of the Cthulhu mythos and his unique pantheon of cosmic deities. His influence has stretched deep into our culture and our subconscious, bringing to light our collective fear of cosmic insignificance when confronted with phenomenon far beyond what we could ever hope to dream up. So deep, in fact, the elements of cosmic horror have slowly sunk themselves, game by game, into the fiber of one video game franchise in particular, Bethesda's Fallout. On October 10th, 1997, Black Isle Studios, the creators and first producers of the Fallout franchise, released the first entry into the Fallout series, aptly named Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, to commercial success and favorable reviews. The game had players roaming a post-apocalyptic California based hundreds of years into the future, following a nuclear apocalypse. Players, taking the role of the Vault Dweller from Vault 13, were tasked with finding a water chip in order to restore the water recycling and pumping machinery inside the vault. Along their journey, players battled roamers and raiders, went up against horrifying mutations brought on by the radiation, fought against super mutants hell-bent on world domination, and countless other dangers of the Californian wastelands. Around 1 year later, on October 29, 1998, the franchise saw its second entry in the form of Fallout 2. This time around, players were thrust 80 years into the future from the previous installment's setting. Players take control of the Chosen One, a descendant of the first game's protagonist, to retrieve a GECK, or a Garden of Eden creation kit, in order to restore purified water to the suffering town of Arroyo. However, despite the game's commercial success and positive reviews from critics and fans alike, the series did not see a true sequel until a decade later, after the rights to the Fallout franchise were bought by Bethesda Studios. It has been under Bethesda's leadership and involvement with the Fallout series that we've seen a slow and steady integration of cosmic horror elements into the franchise, beginning with Fallout 3, running through Fallout 4, and into Fallout 76. In order to best recount the growth of cosmic horror within the Fallout games as influenced by Bethesda Studios, we must first look at their very first entry into the series, Fallout 3. Released on October 30th, 2008 in the United States, Fallout 3 became the very first entry in the Fallout franchise since the commercial failure of Fallout: Brotherhood of Steel, which released in 2004. This installment takes players out of the Californian wastelands and into the wastes of Washington, D.C. Fallout 3 has characters taking control of the Lone Wanderer, a Vault Dweller who escaped Vault 101 in search of their father. It is while wandering the wastelands of D.C. that players can encounter a rather ominous building. Known as the Dunwich Building by map marker and by NPCs, the building is located at the far west side of the map, just south of the F. Scott Key Trailing Campground and westward of Tenpenny Tower, at the very bottom left-hand side of the map. Before ever reaching the location, players will be warned by an NPC to steer clear of the building, considering the Dunwich structure to be both unsafe and unsettling.
One thing I can tell you is stay the hell away from the Dunwich building to the south. That place is bad mojo. I don't know what that place is about, but I hear about weird shit going on.
Upon ignoring the advice of the locals and arriving at the location, players are met with a dilapidated building like all the rest. Inside this building, however, is where the real horror begins. Feral ghouls roam the halls of this long-abandoned structure. Skeletons and blood litter the floors. Footsteps can be heard even when no other living being is inside the building, and flashes of the past interrupt the player's venture into the forsaken building. Upon a few tables and scattered around the building, audio logs from one lone wastelander named Jamie await the player. In these journal entries, Jamie speaks with the listener, detailing his journey to find his father who went mad when coming into possession of an ancient book. However, the longer we listen, the more dire Jamie's condition becomes, until, finally, his narrations become incomprehensible with repetition of the names Alhazared and Gieth.
Sharp knife. Sharp knife to send him to deep temple. Flay and say my words. Abdul comes again on the feast of the weaker. Feast for the deep temple. Born again. Here. Alhazared. Gieth. Gieth.
You see, prior to his arrival, Jamie's father acquired a strange and mysterious book known as the Krivbekna, which led to his father's eventual insanity. Jamie came to the Dunwich building in search of his lost father, but was too late. His father had already become a feral ghoul. Jamie, finding the book that his father had become obsessed with, placed the Krivbekna against a mysterious obelisk he found at the bottom of the building. This obelisk stands tall above the player with a decaying green hue. Vines wrap around the base and trail up the structure. Protruding from one face, a woman appears to be exiting the obelisk, and on the opposite face, 5 skulls are embedded in the structure. And if one stands too close, whispers of Alhazared and Gieth can be heard to the player. It is at this obelisk that players will find Jamie and a band of feral ghouls gathered around this otherworldly structure hidden beneath the building. Upon approaching the obelisk, players will see the absence of one book in particular, the Krivbekna. It is not until the later DLC expansion of Point Lookout that players will find the Krivbekna. Deep in the backwaters of Point Lookout, players will be tasked with ascertaining this mysterious book from a band of swamp folk. The supposed original owner, Obadiah Blackhall, asks the players to retrieve the book in order to restore the artifact to his family.
Swamp folk who, I should mention, absconded with a book, a precious family heirloom. I wanted to ask you, friend, will you get it back?
However, upon accepting the quest and leaving the building, the player is met by Marcella, who asks the player to instead take the book to the Dunwich building and place it against the obelisk to destroy it, as she believes Obadiah will use the contents of the book to control the swamp folk.
Seek a place called Dunwich. Within is an obelisk, itself a wicked thing. It'll consume the book. You need only press the book to its surface.
The Krivbekna can be found within a ritual site created by the swamp folk. At the bottom of this ritual site, a mutilated body with a ritualistic knife stabbed into its skull lays atop a sacrificial table. Behind this sacrifice sits the book in question. Stealing is not an easy task, however, as the swamp folk descend upon the ritual site in an attempt to prevent the taking of their prized possession. With the Krivbekna in hand, the player must return to the Dunwich building and make their way down to the obelisk. Upon reaching it, the player will be prompted to press the artifact against the face of the structure and destroy it permanently. The line, "This obelisk shares its origin with the Krivbekna. Just being near it makes you uneasy," fills the screen, implying whatever forces that created this obelisk also created the Krivbekna. Destroying the book engulfs the room in flames and rewards the player with plus 500 karma as the side quest comes to a close. The Dunwich building, the characters and quests, and the deities mentioned are, as mentioned in countless other videos and wiki sites, references to H.P. Lovecraft's horror short story, The Dunwich Horror, wherein swamp folk breed with a cosmic deity, which in turn spawns Wilbur Whateley. This deformed and ostracized character is indoctrinated into witchcraft and the dark arts by his grandfather in order to raise his father, Ug-Qualtoth. In the story, the character of Whateley also procures one Necronomicon. These story elements track closely with the side quests and the audio tapes found within the Dunwich building, clearly showing Lovecraft as the inspiration for much of the story. Of the many deities in the Cthulhu mythos, the cosmic entity known as Ug-Qualtoth is mentioned within the story, which sounds awfully similar to the deity Ug-Qualtoth. The Krevekna and the name Alhazared are also inspired by the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead within Lovecraft's mythos, and the character of the same name. The name Gieth is also widely considered to be a reference to Lovecraft's underwater city of R'lyeh, where the Great Old One Cthulhu lies dormant. Even Jamie's full name, Jamie Dexter Palabras, is a reference to the Lovecraft character of Charles Dexter Ward. Within Fallout 3, the team over at Bethesda Studios incorporated elements of Lovecraft stories into their own lore and their side quests. These elements of cosmic horror are not directly at the surface and were only expanded upon with subsequent DLC. A single location, a single side quest, a few references here and there, and the influence of Lovecraft's work comes to an end. While not creating their own mythology just yet, the team displays an interest in cosmic horror early on in their involvement with the Fallout franchise, an interest that will only grow with time. Following the commercial and critical success of Fallout 3, Bethesda greenlit Fallout 4. On November 10, 2015, the sequel to Bethesda's first entry into the franchise was released. Unlike the previous two Bethesda-owned installments, this entry into the Fallout franchise gave the player character a voice actor, modified the game engine, and created controversy after controversy. Despite these factors, fans re-entered the Wastelands once more. Players take control of the sole survivor, the only known survivor of Vault 111's cryogenic freezing program, and are tasked with roaming the Commonwealth wastelands in search of their lost son. It is while wandering the wastelands that players can encounter numerous elements of cosmic horror and references to Lovecraft, a drastic step up in cosmic horror integration. In the top right-hand portion of the map, north of Hub City Auto Wreckers and just west of Hugo's Hole, players will encounter a marble quarry formerly owned and operated by the Dunwich Borers, the company who previously owned the Dunwich building featured in Fallout 3. 10 separate quest lines will guide the player towards this destination, making the secrets buried deep inside the quarry difficult to ignore. Instead of workers, however, players will encounter the Forged, raiders driven insane by the horrifying ancient secret buried at the bottom of this quarry. Raider after raider ventured into the depths of this mine, only to return having been driven mad by whatever they encountered in this pre-war quarry. Near said quarry, in Hugo's Hole, players will find Hugo dead on his makeshift bed, and on the nightstand next to him, a holotape. In this holotape, Hugo discusses the possibility of re-entering the quarry, but expresses apprehension due to the forge that occupy the pre-war operation. At the end of the holotape, Hugo speaks with someone, or something, we cannot hear.
The guys don't bother me anymore. That's good. I think it's... What was that? Can't they read the signs? I think it's time I go back inside the quarry. It's been too long. No, I can't. The guys would never let me in. I could kill them all. No, that wouldn't be what it would want. It's time to lay down. Yes, of course. It's next to my bed. I will. It's loaded.
Hugo speaks of, and with, an it, leaving us with more questions than answers as we decide to descend into the mine. After disposing of the numerous raiders that occupy the quarry and the tunnels inside, players are free to traverse the slowly descending rocky tunnels, and the mysteries inside. Terminals along the route deepen the mystery and controversy surrounding the quarry. Numerous complaints were filed against the company by employees. Lax safety regulations that led to numerous injuries and deaths pulled the company's ethics into question. Players also find that the managers of Stations 1 through 3 were summoned to Station 4 with no explanation given, other than that they are needed immediately. Deep and guttural rumblings worsen as the player delves deeper into the quarry's cavernous depths, and flashes of the past play out before the player, just as in the Dunwich building back in the wastelands of Washington, D.C. Descending down the hole known as the Pit by the former employees of the quarry, players will find the raider boss Bedlam and her terminal. Raiders had begun occupying and using the quarry for the metals within the tunnels. However, Bedlam notes that the last 2 parties of raiders she sent down into the mines did not return. In order to uncover this mystery, Bedlam herself descended into the pit, which is where the players will find her and her terminal. In her final entry, Bedlam, after having descended into the pit, repeats the same phrase, "I'm safe in the light." Whatever it is that Bedlam encountered in the darkest reaches of this ancient tunnel, it drove her to insanity. Retracing Bedlam's steps, the player's curiosity pushes them to venture deeper into the tunnels. A flash of the past cuts into the player's vision, showing 3 pre-war employees working on machinery, and as the player's vision returns to the present, the levers flip on their own, plunging the tunnels into darkness as ghouls pour from the shadows. The corpses of raiders adorn the white, cavernous walls and floors of the tunnels as the player presses onward, reaching the aforementioned Station 4 terminal. A holotape from one Tim Schutz awaits the player. A broader picture is painted of the true nature of the Dunwich quarry.
Tim Schutz here. No suspicions were raised when the new equipment was brought in the other day. Crew at Station 4 are still under the impression that we are setting up a new station beyond this area. The standing crew you hired are convincing enough. However, do worry about the project managers at the other stations, especially Bob at Station 1. We all know he takes his job very seriously. His bullet point updates bug the hell out of me. My gut tells me he'll figure out something's going on down here sooner rather than later. Please advise.
It appears that the quarry serves another purpose. A purpose that has been hidden from the other station managers under the pretense of a 5th station being built deeper in the mine. And as the players venture further into the tunnels, another vision of the past fills the screen. A man stands at an altar within a ritual site, with numerous seemingly innocent individuals bound and held captives before him. As the present returns, the ghoulified remnants of the 3 station managers, Bradley Ramone, Bob Stenson, and John Hatfield, await the player. Along with the station managers, the ghoulified remnant of Tim Schutz lurks in the dark as well. It is on his body that the player will find one final holotape from the management.
Tim, good job on keeping things under wraps. We've taken your advice and have asked the other project managers to meet you at Station 4. Stall them if they arrive before we get there. They haven't been told anything. We are very close to accomplishing our goal. Please be patient. You will be rewarded in time.
Whatever the management's sinister agenda might have been, the player can only hypothesize as they stand before a deep pool of water. If the player summons the courage to plunge into the irradiated depths and sink slowly to the bottom, they will find the horrifying mystery that drove many to insanity buried deep underground. A colossal entity, its face only barely visible, lies dormant beneath the tunnels of the Dunwich quarry. And with this discovery, the true nature of the Dunwich Borers, the quarry, and the sinister agenda of the management becomes known. Whatever their purpose, whatever their sinister intent, it all revolves around unearthing this ancient colossus and the dark god, Ug-Qualtoth. While wandering the wastelands of the Commonwealth, players can encounter members of the Cabot House. Located slightly north of center of the map in the Cambridge area, players will come across a pristine 1700s-era home amongst the dilapidated ruins. Floors of well-kept and well-tended housing await the player. An aura of prestige and wealth roams the halls. Artifacts from ancient eras are found upstairs, a laboratory on the 2nd floor, and the inhabitants of this relic of the past dwell within. It is upon speaking with the members of the family and performing their side quests that the mystery of the Cabot House begins to unfold. The story of the Cabot House is split up into 3 distinct quests. Each quest reveals more and more about the mysterious Cabot family, and the secrets they've hidden within their anachronistic walls. The first quest, entitled Special Delivery, the player is approached by Edward Deegan in one of 3 locations: Bunker Hill, the Third Rail in Good Neighbor, or the Dugout Inn in Diamond City. Upon accepting, the player is prompted to venture to Cabot House. There, the player meets a member of the Cabot House, Jack. Before accepting the player's help, Jack will ask the player a myriad of questions relating to the supernatural.
The question is this: do you believe there is other intelligent life in the universe?
In this conversation, Jack mentions the existence of a city over 4,000 years older than any known human civilization, hiding the Rub al-Khali in Arabia, with structures and artifacts created by beings far older than mankind. After this line of questioning, the player is tasked with acquiring a package having gone missing near the Parsons State Insane Asylum. While searching for clues at the asylum, the guard captain will inform the player that the package contained a mysterious serum and had been stolen by a band of raiders. Players will track the mysterious serum to the Parsons Creamery in the north, eliminate the raiders already in conflict, and take back the serum. Players have the option of returning the serum to the Cabots or keeping it for themselves. Regardless of which outcome the player chooses, the second quest, Imogene Takes a Lover, begins. After the player completes the quest, they are immediately prompted by Edward to assist in the locating of Imogene Cabot. Edward points in the direction of Good Neighbor, the Third Rail in particular. One thread leads to another until eventually, a flyer points towards a Brother Thomas, a member of the religious cult Pillars of the Community that may have recruited Imogene into their numbers. If the player speaks with Magnolia and chooses any option besides the aggressive dialogue choice, Magnolia will tell the player where the missing Cabot has disappeared to, the Charles View Amphitheater. Upon arriving, players will find an amphitheater with a rusted teal exterior, a fire burning before the stage, and the Brother Thomas mentioned previously. Approaching Brother Thomas, players may use any number of dialogue options to guarantee Imogene's freedom, or a simple lockpick would suffice as well. It is during the interaction with Brother Thomas that the player learns of the reason for Imogene's imprisonment. Shortly after taking her into the cult, Imogene began to age rapidly, frightening Brother Thomas and the cult members and resulting in her ensuing containment. Once the player ascertains her freedom through any number of means, they are greeted by an aging woman with gray hair and wrinkles, far from the expectation of a younger sister. When the player returns to the Cabot House, they will hear Jack Cabot speaking with Edward Deegan over a ham radio. Edward, who is at the asylum, relays an attack by raiders at the facility until eventually the radio dies, and Jack asks the player to join him in stopping the raiders, who may have injected themselves with the mysterious serum. Cue the final quest, The Secret of the Cabot House. At the start of the quest, Jack will reveal the source of the mysterious serum and how he came to understand its properties.
I suppose it's time you knew. The main benefit of the serum is to halt aging. My family and I are all over 400 years old.
The serum comes directly from their father, Lorenzo Cabot, having discovered anomalies in his father's blood after an ancient artifact had stuck itself to Lorenzo's head. With the serum concocted from Lorenzo's blood, the remaining members of the Cabot House have survived for over 400 years. The source of Lorenzo's insanity is the basis of their prolonged lives, the continuing of his suffering in order to prolong their longevity. Along with his insanity and enhanced lifespan, Lorenzo is also reported to have enhanced strength, increased durability, and a kind of local telepathy created by the artifact atop his head. As a result, Jack built a dampening field around Lorenzo's cell located at the asylum the player visited at the start of this questline. Upon arriving at said asylum, players are met by a band of raiders. Killing them one by one, the player and Jack make their way into the asylum until eventually reaching the cell of the Cabot Patriarch. The player is presented with 2 choices: kill Lorenzo and bring the Cabot lineage to an end as the inhabitants of the Cabot House quickly age and deteriorate as the weeks progress, or free Lorenzo and kill the Cabots. Option A. If the player chooses to kill Lorenzo, Jack will state that Lorenzo had committed many crimes when he had his freedom, and that it was only through the influence of the Cabot name that Lorenzo became locked in a cell rather than just put on death row. As a reward, the player will receive the Zeta gun after a week or so from Jack, and with that, the Cabot House storyline comes to an end. Option B. If the player releases Lorenzo from his cell, he will inform the player of his intentions. Lorenzo intends to kill Jack and the rest of the Cabot House for his 400-year imprisonment beginning in 1898, and will ask the player for their assistance. After arriving at the Cabot House, Jack will berate the player, asking why he would release Lorenzo from captivity. After a few dialogue options, the player can convince Edward to turn against Jack, and with Lorenzo, the Cabot House is brutally killed one by one until only Lorenzo remains standing. During this bloodshed, Lorenzo's full power is revealed with waves of psychic energy blasting the Cabots as they succumb to his wrath. Lorenzo will approach the player and remark on the endless possibility this brave new world has to offer. One without rules or governance, one where no one can stand in Lorenzo's way, or the player's. And with that, Lorenzo shares his blood with the player, a lifetime supply whenever he needs, and the secret of the Cabot House comes to an end. Venturing around the pristine Cabot House, clues to the origin of Lorenzo's artifact can be pieced together from journal entries by Lorenzo himself, terminal entries by Jack, and through dialogue options with the various characters. Let's start at the beginning, chronologically. In February of 1894, Lorenzo Cabot began his journey on the SS Wakeful to the deserts of Saudi Arabia, where he intends to find proof of ancient superstitions. By the 29th of March, having dealt with governments, red tape, and ascertaining a dig crew in Egypt, the expedition eventually reached the empty quarter of Arabia. On the 3rd of April, 1894, the diggers eventually struck a stone, circular and large in structure. Fragmentary inscriptions with runes that match ancient texts, possibly a monumental plaza of sorts, continues to be unearthed, and a week or so later, finds the ancient crown that now rests upon Lorenzo Cabot's head. By this point, Lorenzo believes the structure to be made by a race other than humans, long predating their rise to dominance on Earth. At the end of a tunnel, a burial crypt is found, and, upon lifting the lid, the diggers fled in shock and horror at the abomination hidden inside the ancient sarcophagus. It is only later that Lorenzo comes to the realization that the city he uncovered was not an ancient human civilization, but something far more eldritch in nature. Taking the crown and reburying the city, Lorenzo pledges to return to unlock the secrets of the ancient city. Sometime after returning to the United States, Lorenzo appears to have committed some sort of atrocity, enough to have him planted firmly on death row before the intervention of the Cabot family forced Lorenzo into a cell in the Parsons State Insane Asylum. It is around this time that Jack Cabot began experimenting on his father's crown, trying his best to unearth the secrets of this ancient artifact in order to save his father from himself and from insanity. At some point in his experiments, Jack uncovered the unusual properties in his father's blood, properties that, if infused with serum and injected into their bodies, would elongate their lives indefinitely so long as they had access to the serum. By 1968, the Cabot family was in full use of the serum. Imogene had begun experimenting with how long she could go off the serum without adverse side effects, and Jack had begun logging his experiments on his father into his personal terminal. Attempting to remove the artifact from Lorenzo's head would surely kill him, as signaled by a drop in blood pressure and a flatlining in brainwaves. All attempts at studying the artifact had yielded little results over the many decades of study. In Jack's entries, the players can piece together Lorenzo's true character when under the influence of the artifact. Extreme paranoia, psychotic tendencies, biological immortality, physical durability, telekinesis as generated by the artifact, and the infusion of abnormal substances in Lorenzo's blood. Utilizing an adrenaline field, Jack has successfully contained Lorenzo within a cell at the asylum by dampening his telekinetic abilities. By 1996, the Cabots had gone through a number of aliases to avoid arousing suspicion due to their lack of aging. By 2058, Edward Deegan had begun working with the Cabots, remaining in their service until the time of Fallout 4. 2115 harkens the final entry in Jack's terminal, wherein Jack dives into the depths of the mysterious nameless city. Instead of searching for clues in the artifact, Jack turns his attention to finding clues of the Nameless City's location in the empty quarter in hopes of finding more artifacts. Following the decimation of the Cabot House, the player can speak with Lorenzo directly to receive answers to our long-burning questions.
I was curious about the ancient artifact you always wear.
Through it, I commune with the ancient minds that founded our civilization. Whether they live within it, or it communicates with them through time or space, or whether it simply holds their memories, I don't know. What I do know is that it...
And with these questions answered, the Cabot House down to one sole survivor, and the secrets of the Cabot House having been told, the quest line comes to a bloody end. The fall of the Cabot House pulls from a few different Lovecraft short stories and mythos. The ancient and nameless city that Lorenzo unearthed is a direct reference to the Nameless City, wherein the protagonist uncovers an ancient and alien city that predates mankind by many thousands of years. Many story beats and plot elements are pulled directly from the short story and infused with the Cabot House plot lines. The direct mention of immortality in the moving from city to city to avoid arousing suspicion is a direct reference to the case of Charles Dexter Ward. The SS Wakeful, listed in Lorenzo's Cabot journal, is a reference to the SS Alert from the Call of Cthulhu. Along with that, there are numerous other minor yet distinct references to Lovecraft stories, most notably The Rats on the Wall, The Moonbog, and the aforementioned Call of Cthulhu. The Abrimlin Field, imprisoning Lorenzo Cabot, also refers to the historical occult work of the Book of Abramlin. Stepping onto the docks of the old and decrepit town, an eerie dread fills the stomach of the player as they venture forward into the dilapidated town. Hints of fog and mist cling to the cloudy skies as they struggle to make sense of their surroundings. Eventually, a thick, irradiated fog consumes the land, bringing with it monstrosities beyond the imagination of the player. Horrific fog crawlers, mirelurks, and other abominations roam the mists, waiting for their time to feast upon the flesh of the unlucky. Two warring factions, the citizens of Far Harbor and the Church of the Children of Adam, feud over the irradiated fog. And as the player ventures out into the fog for the first time, they must make sense of the horrors inside. This entire DLC expansion, the island and the quest lines, the characters and enemies are drenched in elements of cosmic horror, though this time from a familiar horror author, Stephen King. Based primarily on the short story The Mist, the expansion is set on Mount Desert Island, which is located off of the coast of Maine, the primary setting for an abundance of King's stories. This island, drenched in a thick, irradiated fog, has been slowly killing the inhabitants of the city. In the shadows of the impenetrable fog, monstrous entities, known as fog crawlers, feast upon the flesh of those who venture into their domain. Just as in King's story, a religious cult praises the fog and believes it to be a sign from a higher power that is unleashing its will upon the land, while those who do not believe struggle to fend off the horrors hidden within the dangerous mist. An entire DLC based around the concept of cosmic horror, drawing inspiration from the short story of Stephen King, integrates itself into Fallout 4's environment. No longer do players have minimal side quests dedicated to the work of Lovecraft, but instead an entire DLC, an area infused with elements of cosmic horror. Scattered around the Commonwealth are several other minor allusions and references to the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The Children of Adam, a fanatical religious group originating from Megaton and Fallout 3, worship their deity Adam and his radiation, which they refer to as his glow. Given that radiation mutates an individual and slowly corrodes the mind of the sufferer, and given the fact this religious group refers to the radiation as the glow, the group and the glow are considered references to H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, wherein an otherworldly color lands on a farm and mutates the inhabitants and the surrounding area. Kingsport Lighthouse, an area associated with the Children of Adam, is also a reference to Lovecraft. The city of Kingsport is considered one of the earliest cities established in Lovecraft's mythos, Inside this lighthouse, the children of Adam worship a glowing one, similar to how characters within Lovecraft's The Festival perform pre-human rites. Finally, a house north of Goodneighbor harbors a dark secret. Inside this unassuming house, players will encounter the Pickman's Gallery, a host of disturbing and unsettling paintings, as well as mutilated raiders. The side quest Pickman's Gift is associated with this location. The name and the location are references to Lovecraft's Pickman's Model, where a Boston painter named Pickman creates horrifying and graphic paintings that slowly become more unsettling and evil as the narrator moves further into the painter's gallery. Compared to Fallout 3's references and inspirations, Fallout 4 leans more heavily into Lovecraft's lore. Whether it be pulling references from any number of Lovecraft's short stories, pulling inspiration from his stories to fuel their own, or creating unique storylines rooted in cosmic horror tones and principles, Bethesda is clearly pushing the Fallout franchise in the direction of cosmic horror. Slowly but surely, Bethesda is modifying the core thematic structure of the Fallout franchise, a shift that is best exemplified by their latest entry into the series, Fallout 76. From the beginning, Fallout 76 appeared to be different from every Fallout title that came before it. The endless controversies and bad decisions, Fallout First, the forced online multiplayer, the initial lack of NPCs, the bare-bones method of holotape storytelling that led to a rather short campaign, the bright and vibrant and oftentimes horrifying landscapes covering an expansive map, and the monsters and entities unlike anything seen previously in a Fallout title. These elements combined have created a Fallout experience unique to this game and this game alone. Many might consider this title distinctly un-Fallout due to its massive departures from the tone and ambiance of entries prior, while some might consider this another solid installment in the Fallout franchise. Regardless of personal opinions, this entry is, at the end of the day, with all of its problems and lore-defying decisions, another entry in Bethesda's Fallout franchise. Upon the game's release in the fall of 2018, players are met with a landscape and game unlike anything previously encountered in a Bethesda-led Fallout entry. The tone and the ambiance, the regions and the creatures, and the lore, it all felt distinctly 76, and distinctly Lovecraftian. From the creative choices made in the design of the landscape, to the initial isolation found within the first year and a half of the game's life, to the creatures and entities found within the West Virginian wastes, Fallout 76 has managed to cultivate a tone rooted in the unknown, the awe of the incomprehensible, and the knowledge that humanity's existence is insignificant to entities, events, and agendas far beyond our comprehension. No longer is Bethesda looking towards Lovecraft for references and allusions to infuse into their game, but is instead looking to the principles of cosmic horror to begin developing their own cosmic tale. And so, let us begin with the country, the landscape, the locations, and the regions of Fallout 76. The initial isolation of the first year and a half of the game's life cycle stuck with many players. Upon waking in an empty vault, players exited the fortified bunker into an equally empty world, devoid of human life and devoid of companionship. The only comfort players had lied within the robots they encountered, the players met every now and again, and the sparsely placed holotapes that dotted the map in an Easter egg hunt style search for answers as to why this world had been left so devoid of human life. As players roamed the wastelands of West Virginia, they wandered into several surreal and beautifully sinister biomes, each more fascinating and mysterious than the last. Regions in particular, namely the Cranberry Bog and the Mire, are infused with elements of cosmic horror. It should be noted that specific locations relating to creatures or occult activity will not be listed in this section of the video, but in the sections relegated to creatures and cult activity, respectively. Where lies the strangling fruit that came from the hand of the sinner, I shall bring forth the seeds of the dead to share with the worms that gather in the darkness, and surround the world with the power of their lives, while from the dim-lit halls of other places, Forms that never were and never could be, writhe for the impatience of the few who never saw what could have been. In the black water, with the sun shining at midnight, those fruits shall come ripe, and in the darkness of that which is golden shall split open to reveal the revelation of the fatal softness in the earth. The shadows of the abyss are like the petals of a monstrous flower that shall blossom within the skull and expand the mind beyond what any man can bear. Whether it decays under the earth, or above on green fields, or out in the sea, or in the very air, all shall come to revelation, and to revel in the knowledge of the strangling fruit. And the hand of the sinner shall rejoice, for there is no sin in shadow, or in light the seeds of the dead cannot forgive. And there shall be, in the planting in the shadows, a grace and a mercy, from which shall blossom dark flowers, and their teeth shall devour and sustain and herald the passing of an age. That which dies shall still know life and death, for all that decays is not forgotten, and reanimated it shall walk the world in the bliss of not knowing. And then there shall be a fire that knows the naming of you, and in the presence of the strangling fruit, its dark flame shall acquire every part of you that remains. The mire is a swampy region, home to twisting vines, large tree canopies, and tall groves. Tread deeper into the dark swamp, and you may find mutated plants known as strangler vines that infest the mire and attach to any living things, permanently changing them into something entirely new and bringing them under its control. A new world that is growing and spreading under the influence of the strangler hearts, large mutated flowers hidden out of sight and under the soft earth. A bright pinkish red coats the region in an otherworldly aura, brought up by the nuclear explosion of Vault 94's Gek, following an attack by the Wastelanders after betraying the Vault Dwellers' open invitation into their vault. Forever steeped in darkness, the mire hides secrets in every dim-lit corner. The Cranberry Bog, the typical final region players will explore, houses dilapidated farms, groves of huge, impossibly carnivorous sundew plants, and radiation-soaked, water-filled quarries. This expansive region hosts the most dangerous and otherworldly of dangers to the player. Large, building-sized sundew plants creating forests of red and sprinklings of yellow mists, flat plains broken up by trenches and drainage systems, and ruptures in the earth that spew out monstrosities unlike anything seen before in the wastelands. Inside the forest region are several mysterious locations, many of which provide evidence of cult activity and otherworldly events. Many interesting unmarked locations exist within this region: the Cultist Totem, the Mothman Museum, the Prehistoric Bones Camp, and the Silver Bridge. These locations, filled with otherworldly tones, greet the player on their travels. In terms of marked locations, players can travel to Point Pleasant. It is here that players will find cult activity, shrines to a deity, and a holotape to an even more horrifying secret that will be expanded upon later. It is here that players will find the Mothman Museum, dedicated to the cryptid entity of the same name. It is here that the players will find a collapsed bridge, referencing the Silver Bridge collapse of 1968 that took 46 lives and was predated by the appearance of the Mothman. Hidden away in the mire, the floating Tanagra town, pushed upwards towards the sky by strangling vines, hides away dark secrets. Players must carefully navigate their way up the long, red tendrils that strangle the dead town and enter into the innards of the rocky edifice. After killing the cave crickets that infest the hollow interior, the player will find a familiar face. A cyclopean face, eyes closed, buried in dirt and rock, lies underneath the dead town, having been buried underneath the town long before its gradual rise into the treetops. Inside the Savage Divide, the Hopewell Cave can be found south of the Pumpkin House, and just east, right off Highway 66, is marked on the map by a face imposed onto a cave. Inside the cave, an interesting mystery begins to unfold as the player ventures deeper into the cavernous depths. Evidence of an ancient indigenous culture, the Adena tribe, fills the cave, dating from anywhere between 1000 to 200 BCE. An anthropologist's holotape found within the cave sums up the complexities of the archaeological site.
As my study of Hopewell Cave continues, I'm struck by the atypical nature of this Adena-based burial complex. The Adena culture generally buried their dead in large mounds and similar hill-shaped earthworks. Due to the primitive nature of the tools from 1000 to 200 BC, stone carving was not yet a part of their society. However, archaeologists who investigated this skull cave site removed remains and artifacts belonging to the Adena culture. I wonder if it's possible that the remains of the Adena people were moved to this location well after their society ceased to exist. For one culture to treat another's with such reverence it's unusual, at best. I will continue my research to discover more.
For some unknown reason, the Adena culture may have been moved to this site in a move deemed unusual by the anthropologist. The question is then, who moved the Adena, and why? Why treat the relics and bones as though they were sacred? And most importantly, what is the massive, ancient creature whose bones are embedded within the walls of this cave system? Located northeast of Federal Disposal Field HZ-21, and added only recently to the game, upright stones sit perched atop a landing overlooking the Appalachian wastes. Called the Mysterious Guidestones, these monuments are adorned with carvings and symbols that have yet to be fully understood that may hint towards a deeper history hidden inside the Appalachian wastes. Who created them? Aliens? An ancient culture such as the Adena? One of the many cults within the game? Something entirely mundane? Or perhaps something with an agenda far beyond our understanding? Whoever built these guidestones, the question has to be asked. What are these guidestones guiding the players towards? And what secrets do they hide? Inside Vault-Tec University, a terminal can be found on the second floor in room 208, belonging to a Professor Blake. In his notes to himself, Blake mentions the Horse Creek petroglyphs, a location of mention only within the game. Here, he and his student Jacqueline hypothesize on the meaning of these ancient runes, admitting they do not match any known petroglyphs known to man, with Jacqueline claiming they had otherworldly origins. Eventually, the files are moved to an offline storage out of paranoia, both from Jacqueline and from an Agent Wilson. On his own terminal, Wilson catalogs the investigation of the mysterious guidestones from his end. Unfortunately, the files are hidden away, unable to be accessed at this time. And with that, the mystery of the guidestones hits a dead end within the game. Over on the Fallout 76 subreddit, SenyraInnov posted a new mystery in Appalachia. Can we solve it together? On Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. Here, Senira notes that a player named NameiT, Tanik, shared a map with me, where he puts all the engravings and the landmarks, 8 total, together to form a proper map. They all fit together, and nobody seems to know what it means. It appears that overlaying the collaged pieces of the guidestones onto the Cranberry Bog, particularly the Watoga region, reveals some commonalities. Another clue, found by Intrepid 359, points towards an alien alphabet that can be translated into English using the game files. And, according to an April post by Intrepid, the stones could possibly read, "We have traveled for so long. Soon we will arrive. Your planet weakens. When the war or destruction comes, save yourselves. We are coming from the stars. Listen for our signal. Look for our arrival. We are coming to Earth." But, unfortunately, the trail has run cold. Regardless of the true intentions of these stones, they do bear a striking resemblance to the Georgia Guidestones. These stones, located in Elbert County, Georgia, have also stirred investigations, with the most common interpretation laying out basic concepts for rebuilding civilization should it collapse. Fallout 76 contains creatures and entities unlike any seen previously in a Bethesda-helmed Fallout title. Even the original titles created by Bethesda Studios did not include such otherworldly creatures rooted in cryptozoology and the supernatural. the Grafton Monster, the Sheep Squatch, the Flatwoods Monster, and even the Mothman all pull from cryptozoology and West Virginian folklore. Original creatures, such as the horrifying Wendigo Colossus, also fills out the roster. Instead of looking towards previously used creatures, or even new creations, the team made the conscious decision to look towards the mysterious, to the otherworldly, and to the unexplained, to fill the expansive wasteland of West Virginia. Due to this focus on cryptozoology and the incorporation of folklore and mythology, Fallout 76's creatures create an ambiance of horror, mystery, and cosmic intrigue. And, even still, two creatures in particular haunt the game in every single corner, and weigh on the minds of the players and investigators alike. Climbing up the stairs of the South Mountain Lookout, players are greeted with a beautiful view of the surrounding region, the Savage Divide. The lookout resembles others within the game. Remnants of previous inhabitants fill the space: a bed, a first aid kit, a radio, firewood, a heater, a desk with a smashed terminal, and some food. Along with these is a large map of the region. Winding rivers and lakes, mountains, and walking trails cover a majority of the map. Stabbed into this map is a knife, marking a location hiding an ancient and ungodly secret. The cult of the Mothman has sunk its fingers into the fiber of the game, drenching the ambience of the world in the occult. The Ingram Mansion, Johnson's Acre, Prickett's Fort, the Big Maw, the Swallowed Town, Sacraments, Blake's Offering, Moth Home, Tree Stump Altar, and more, spread throughout the world, point towards this massive and influential cult within the wastelands. The cult originated within the town of Point Pleasant, where the original 1960s sightings and the collapse of the Silver Bridge took place. Prior to the war, followers of the cult of the Mothman began amassing in secret, viewing the creature as a divine deity. They performed rituals and rites, established numerous hidden shrines, and attempted to commune with their deity in hopes of catching glimpses of the future. One brother, Charles, claimed to have communed with the Mothman and had been warned of a coming flood, a flood with salvation found in high grounds. Members fled to the roofs of buildings, only for the flood to come in the form of nuclear annihilation to wipe away those who heeded Brother Charles's warning. Prior to the Great War, the cult of the Mothman purchased a mine as a means of escaping the following flood. Once the flood came and went, the survivors of the nuclear devastation sought refuge and continued worship within the cavernous depths of their abandoned mine. Led by the High Priestess, the cult of the Mothman descended into the maze of tunnels to find salvation and continued prosperity, but found something entirely different.
There are other things in this world now that cannot be explained. The end of the world has awoken. Something. We all know the Mothman is out there, stalking and watching us, but what of the unseen? There are things we can only glimpse in our minds. Great entities beyond our comprehension. The Mothman is a creature more like us than the unknowable horrors in the peripheral vision of our subconscious minds. No longer just a false memory now. I have heard a tale of this entity made real, deep in the earth. The storyteller was mad by any reckoning, but his story, no less true. My name is Jeff Lane, and I will lay bare this Watcher. No matter how deep I must go, I will come to know the true nature of the Interloper.
Prior to the Great War, Jeff Lane obsessed over the legend of the Mothman. He moved from Texas to West Virginia in hopes of searching for the elusive creature, eventually joining the cult of the Mothman and worshipping his newfound deity. He would hand out flyers, posters, Mothman memorabilia, and would spread the word of the cult of the Mothman in hopes of spreading the gospel of the cult. Lane was a devout member of the cult, unflinching in his beliefs, until the collapse of society following the Great War. Lane, having survived the fall of the bombs, began catching glimpses of someone or something in the peripheral of his mind. His devotion to the Mothman began to waver, as his mind was drawn towards something else entirely, something more horrifying and unknowing than the Mothman, something far more powerful and far more cosmic than the deity he had formerly worshipped. The Mothman is a creature, more like us than the unknowable horrors in the peripheral of our subconscious minds. Lane began hearing a voice in his dreams and his subconscious, a false memory come to reality, bringing him towards one particular location, and towards this unknowing cosmic entity known as the Interloper. And this brings the narrative back to the South Mountain Lookout, and the map resting against the wall. The knife stabbed into the map points towards the mine the cult of the Mothman had ascertained, and towards the location Lane had been drawn towards in his lucid dreams, the Lucky Hole Mine. Originally owned and operated by the Lucky Hole Mining Company, this abandoned mine sits unsuspectingly within the Savage Divide. Rusted crates, abandoned vehicles, terminals, and cult's activity await those who venture onto the long-abandoned property. Gnarled vines and skeletons of unknown and long-dead entities adorn the location. Bonfires illuminate the dark corners of the entrance with a dimly lit, yet fiery light. An atmosphere of dread and of isolation and of the unknown drowns the player as they venture closer towards the entrance and towards the secrets lying dormant within the mine's depths. A sparsely lit structure greets the eyes of those who enter as members of the cult take an immediate interest to those who intrude upon their sacred location. To the right, a terminal sits on a destroyed desk, holding information to the events leading the cult to this location. A worker guarding this abandoned mineshaft shares his experience with a strange woman and her friends who intrude upon the mine. Fearing for his safety, he relinquished the rights of the mine to the cult, fleeing from the mine and the horrors within. Atop a staircase, a holotape lies hidden underneath a bucket. Upon loading it up, the familiar voice of Jeff Lane echoes off the damp walls of the cavern.
The Interloper is here. I can feel it clearly. Last night, in visions more real than the senses, it called to me, and I go to it now. Signs are all around that I am not the only one to hear the call, though where they have failed, I will not, for it summons me alone in the end. Before I go deeper, for the truth revealed changes all. By its very nature, let it be known, in this world, the Interloper has chosen Jeff Lane as the conduit of the unknowable. Together, the hidden reality becomes manifest at long last.
Lane, having been drawn completely to the Lucky Hole Mine, relays his status as the Chosen One, as the conduit of the unknown, who will reveal the truth of the Interloper, and of a hidden reality and truth hidden beneath the earth. Where others have failed, he claims he will not. Dark tunnels stretch further into this ancient earth. Totems to deities, to the Mothman, and possibly to others, are stabbed into the hard dirt. Cult members actively pray and perform their ritual rites to their god, to the Mothman. Even deeper, a central ritual chamber in Church of the Mothman awaits the player. Pews, stringed lights, and hard earth. An altar, a coffin, and a skull. Sermons, summoning rites, and sacrifices. A large, metallic face protruding from the earth. Tucked away in a hard-to-see tunnel, a pathway to a back room is traversable. Another large totem greets the player, as well as the holotape labeled Cultist Redemption. It is from this room that another hidden tunnel can be found. Behind a wall of mossy green, a small and stretching tunnel, unlike those created by the mining company, leads the player towards the darkest secret within the West Virginian wastes. A feeling of dread fills the stomach of those who see it for the first time. What Jeff Lane had foretold. Before the player lies an entity far more ancient than man itself. The Interloper. The large entity is gray, with long, moving tendrils that spill from its mouth. Warped arms emerge from its back and remain motionless. Long, multi-jointed legs stretch away from its small torso and into the earth behind it. No visible eyes or nose can be found, only the omnipresent ringing that grows louder and louder and louder as the player creeps ever closer to this eldritch entity. An entity that whispered to Jeff Lane and possibly influenced the cult of the Mothman. Is the Mothman, known as a heralder of tragedy and the unknown, a heralder for the Interloper, a pawn in the cosmic entity's larger plan? Next to the cosmic entity are the skeletal remains of those who came before, with empty jars near their corpses. They likely poisoned themselves in a sacrificial manner, as tributes or offerings to the Interloper. Surrounding the Interloper are 5 large metallic heads like the one in Tanagra Town and the Dunwich Borers. The one in the altar room is unique compared to the rest, with no clear explanation as to why. And next to it still is an obelisk, as ancient as the Interloper's cavernous grave. Protruding from this obelisk is a skeleton, protruding in a similar way as the ancient obelisk found underneath the Dunwich building in the wastelands of DC. The ancient obelisk altar next to an eldritch being, and the ancient obelisk found underneath the Dunwich building beg the question: is the Interloper the mysterious Ug-Qualtoth mentioned in DC in the Commonwealth, or at least somehow related in terms of belonging to the same pantheon of cosmic deities? The massive metallic heads buried in the wastelands of the Commonwealth and West Virginia, the ancient artifacts found in ancient nameless cities buried deep under the empty court of the Arabian Desert, and of whispers of another ancient city buried underneath Mojave Desert, the evidence of an advanced culture having moved the remains of the Adena culture, and the ancient guidestones with known petroglyphs point not just to cosmic deities within the wastelands, but to a possible preceding ancient civilization that died out or left to the stars long ago. And if the translations relayed by Intrepid 359 are true, are these aliens returning to Earth the Zetans, or some other ancient race? Will this ancient race return to Earth to reclaim their lost cities and awaken their slumbering god? And what of the entity referred to as the baby or mini Interloper, found within the deep, right in the path of the player as they head towards the secret Chinese base? This smaller and underdeveloped version of the Interloper sits quietly in a vibrant room. No comments from any NPC, no holotape mentioning it, no cult activity, no buzzing, no whispering, no altars, just the player and the solitary, unmoving entity. Its placement is deliberate. Bethesda wanted the players to see this and to ask questions, and to stumble upon the rabbit hole that is the Interloper. Bethesda wanted the players to start asking questions and following the threads they've sewn into the fabric of this world. And while I would love to dive into the theories on what it all means and how it all connects, that is a conversation best saved for another video. Bethesda picked up a property on the verge of collapse and attempted to continue this series in stride. Their first entry stuck with the themes and ambiance created in Fallout 1 and perfected in Fallout 2. Themes of intense nationalism, of corporate greed, of government corruption, and the folly of man as they succumb to their own hubris through nuclear annihilation. Somewhere along the lines, however, the series shifted, slowly but surely, into something entirely new. This transformation started small and insignificant. It started with a location in the corner of the map, with a name and some minor lore pointing towards Lovecraft. A few holotapes, a few characters, a small and relatively insignificant side quest introduced through DLC, and the transformation seemingly ends. Then this transformation suddenly continues and grows in size and scope. Now there are multiple locations relating to Lovecraft, a fully fleshed out side quest with a lore pulling from several Lovecraft stories, and an entire DLC built around cosmic horror elements. The characteristics of cosmic horror had been woven into the fabric of the game, the strands visible, but not the sole focus of the fabric. And finally, this transformation comes to fruition. There are multiple locations relating to Lovecraft and cosmic horror, entities, cryptid and cosmic alike, fill the expansive wasteland. Regions drenched in elements of cosmic horror, occult imagery and activity as if pulled straight from Lovecraft's pages, and bits and pieces of lore that points towards otherworldly powers at play. I theorize that the elements of cosmic horror will continue to grow in small steps with each subsequent DLC. Fractured Steel, renamed Steel Dawn, was slated to be released in December of 2020, but was accidentally released early. As this expansion becomes public and players are once more entering into a newly changed wasteland, I can only wonder what new secrets will be discovered, what new mysteries will be uncovered, what new monstrosities players will bear witness to, and what answers we may finally receive. In the wake of the Steel Dawn expansion, I'm left with one final question. Where will Bethesda's Fallout take us next?